Hey guys, welcome back to the Addicted Bookworm, where my addiction is all over the internet. And I'm checking my time. Sorry. On this channel, I do book hauls, book reviews, both digital and physical media, audiobooks, and so much more. So, in today's, which is going to be my final video, because I am going to upload the other two and this one, and then I am going to finish reading a little bit more of Onyx Storm, my least favorite romantasy that I own, and or own the license to, but I also own the physical copy. I own the physical copy that I've ever read in my entire life. It's not a great book. It is not a great book at all. But I have the licensing and I own a physical copy of the book, so I'm good. So I was born in 1979. I was born December 16th, 1979. I was born the last, I think, 2.5 weeks of the 70s. And the 70s was about free love. You had the Vietnam War, which did not turn out well for America. And it literally was the war. I think it was literally the only war we lost, though I'm probably wrong at this point in my life and through all the stuff I've seen in my in the 45 years that I've been alive. So, so being a child of the 80s, and I was an 80s kid. I'm a Generation Xer to the core. There was a lot of things they had back then they don't have now. I'm actually going to look this up because I really want to find out. Okay. Um. So. Um. Okay. So apparently Rift is okay. So apparently they're still around. So back in the 80s, it was founded in like 1988. So I must have been at least I was probably maybe about 9 years old, maybe 10, when they showed up. Now, before they showed up, and I know I'm about ready to confuse the heck, especially a lot of my younger subscribers. Um, but they used to hand out in class paper that we had to give to our parents. And so I gave it to my mom, and my mom, and she looked it over, and I didn't know what Riff was, but I had let mom read it, and I went off and did what little girls do. And so she came into my room and she goes, "Hey, I'm gonna give you $20 so you can get like 2 books because Um, but um, but trying not to be that way, I ended up giving her back her 20 because I didn't spend it. They actually gave me like a free book. So we go there, and they open it up, and they put in all these books. I'm really weird about Rift. They always seem to appear on days that it was sunny. It was sunny. It was sunny. And so yeah, I mean, I think I was at like 2 of them, but then after that was like, I think it's like when I ended up like going to live with my aunt, and Rift wasn't there, which was sad. Um, but yeah, so I went there, and um, and they gave me like one or two free books, and I came home and I gave Mom back her 20, and I said, "Hey, Mom, or I said, hey, Mommy, they gave me these books for free." So I said, "Here's your 20." People might think that I would probably have just run out and bought candy and stuff like that. I wasn't dumb. My mom would have known I spent it for books. And I wasn't going to get disciplined for, I might have been like 9 or 10, but I still had, I had a lot of measure of common sense, which is not so common these days. So I did that, and you know, she wanted to look at them, because her being a parent, she wanted to know what her little girl had chosen, and she was like, "Hey, I like this." So she cleared it. It was totally appropriate. And the thing is that back in the late 80s, when Ripped was starting out and they were handing out free books and teachers' papers, there was no such thing as like inappropriate books. And like what we talk about today, inappropriate books. There was picture books. Heck, they even allowed you to take home a picture book so that you could read to your younger siblings to get them into reading. And Rift was very instrumental in me developing the love for reading. And then they have the Scholastic book fairs. And I still remember those book fairs so vividly. Like, I didn't have any money, but I still went in the library and I still looked at, and the books that are out today would have never been published back in the, in the early, 90s. The 80s and the 90s and on. It definitely had a lot more focus on, white characters, and I was a little girl, and I did not, to me, it was like these covers were pretty, and I wanted to buy them all, but that would have required more money than Mom had. And the books also weren't expensive. They were like $2.99 or something like that. But reading in the 80s and the 90s was so different. You didn't have this fear of what children were reading. You didn't have this demonization of teachers and of professors and of schools, and there was no desire to dismantle the Department of Education. It was a department that we as children believed was going to last forever. And now we're all in our 40s and we're realizing that, boy, we're really dumb thinking that. And so, it really is sad about how things are going. And I still remember those days. I still remember just, laying on my stomach. Boy, I could do that. Laying on my stomach and reading a book. Reading a book I got from Rift. Reading a book I got from the library. There was no bed bugs, thank God. It was so different. It was so different, and it just felt like it was so innocent and so sweet, and that there was that this time would never end, and it would stay like this forever. And now we're in our 40s, and we realize, yeah, that's another thing we were dumb enough to believe. But then it's like you have this federal push, and I called it. I was like, my brother doesn't want to admit to it, but I called it. And I told him, this is what is going to happen. Because I had read about, dismantling the Department of Education, and I was like, Stephen, they're going to dismantle the Department of Education. They're going to go after museums. They're going to go after libraries. And his response was that, I don't remember word for word what he said, But his attitude was that he didn't care about that as much as he cared about illegal immigration and his job. Like, oh, tomorrow I won't have a job, and all this stuff if Harris becomes president. You know, so it was two very different. Like, I was concerned about the overall picture, and everything, and my brother's kind of was like, it didn't really matter to him. And now all of a sudden he's finding out that, oh, there's not going to be any summertime reading program for children because they don't have the money, or librarians are being, like, not librarians, but like certain types of different people are being fired for their job because they don't have the money anymore. So, and he has this opinion about tariffs, like, yeah, these tariffs are not good. And I'm thinking back ahead, but you voted for it. You voted for tariffs. You wanted tariffs. And I think I mentioned that to my brother, and then he's like, he had to admit that, yeah, I'm right. He did vote for that. He did vote for economic fallout and the destruction of Americans' economy and all that type of stuff. But he also did agree that the framers, they gave tariff powers to Congress. And he's like, yeah, Congress needs to get their tariff powers back. And I do agree with that. They do. But what's happening now compared to what happened in the past just feels like an entirely different world, where everything seemed different and wholesome and wonderful. And now we live in this nightmare that comes out of some of the worst dystopian novels you could possibly even begin to imagine. And I was actually reading on my phone, yeah, I know, I was on my phone, about how used bookstores and bookstores in general are becoming a refuge for people that are facing these bans. Like, it's, because judges have given protection over used bookstores and all that. And I remember, speaking of used bookstores, I remember a time, and I don't even know if this place is even open. It's been, oh my lord, it's been, what, 20 years? Or maybe even 18 years since I last went in there. But what it was that it was a bookstore, and you go in there, and you buy a book, and you could exchange it for another book that was the exact same price. So I went in there one time. My mother I told my, hey mom, I want to go to this one place. And they're like, well, where's it at? Well, it's over here, and this is what it is. And they're like, okay. So she gave me, once again, she gave me $20. And I went over there. And I spent like hours just fingering the titles and the spines. The spines were old. This was the epitome of a used bookstore. And I would set my butt on the ground. I was like in my 20s. I was up in Pennsylvania. And I would sit there and I would just pull out books and see what the books were about. And finally I got the books that I wanted. It was like, maybe it was like $16, $17. And I got home and my mom was like, keep the change. You may want to get yourself a candy bar or something like that. And I would sit there and I would spend the next like 2 weeks reading these books. They were like young adult horror and all that. And I remember my mother came home one time, and she had gone to she went to the library. No, not that kind of library. It was actually a bookstore in St. Louis called the Library. And she went over there and she came back and she's like, I got something for you. And of course, immediately I was like, oh, what does my mom have for me? It was actually a Nancy Drew book called Clue of the Whistling Bagpipes. And I devoured it, and that's how I fell in love with Nancy Drew. And nowadays, I think of that time, and I'm like, I just really wish I could go back in time and just live in that world for a couple of days. And everything. Um, because it just felt so good. Just felt so good. But that's how it was like for me in the 80s and in the 90s. Before we had before we had large scale book bans, before we had Mom's Liberty and all that type of stuff. And I'm hoping at some point in the future we will get some of that back, but it will take a long time, it seems, for us to get that back. Alright, so I'm going to get back to reading my least favorite book of the universe, and I'll see you guys around.